Welcome everybody to the show. Geoff Neupert, welcome back. It's good to see you,
Michael,
brother.
thank you for having me, Michael. Appreciate it. Good to see
Always good to chat. This is our trilogy episode here on Strength Connection.
you. Is it? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been few and far between. This is like a big release in between, volume two and three, but
Okay.
anything can happen in the trilogy.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm glad we have, this will be the third one. That's great. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So
sounds
I've learned a lot from you in our times that we've chatted before, and as I've mentioned, really love specifically your YouTube channel and the work that you're putting out there for just the density of quality information on strength. Because it's no surprise there's so much knowledge out there, quote unquote knowledge, that it's so confusing about stuff. So to have somebody like you who is condensing down and refining really like the big pieces, I found like just so powerful and really just such clarity in it. So what I wanted to do today is really take some of the videos that you've put up over the last like 6 months or so, not go crazy too far back,
okay.
and just dive deeper into them.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
Perfect. How long have you been coaching now?
I started taking payment for my services in 1993. So
Oh,
what is that? 32 years?
32 years, yeah. And
Yeah,
started primarily with kettlebells in 2002.
correct. Yeah. So there was, traditional gym coaching in 93 to 90. I guess as a trainer, right? 93 to, God, my goodness, 96, I want to say. And then strength and conditioning at Rutgers University from 90, like January 97 to summer of 2000, excuse me, almost said 2020. Time flies, man. And, uh, and then I opened up my own personal training studio in 2001, right? And then that's gone through various permutations, right? I ran something on my own. I had trainers working for me. I had a business partner. We expanded. We had a couple sites, right? Like a site within a site and a freestanding site, and then got rid of my business partner. And I've done a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So who are you primarily working with now, the demographics that you're working with?
mostly guys over 40. And actually now it's interesting. I hate to say this, now that I'm over 50, like a lot of people over 50.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I know there's a lot of talk about like difference between being in your 20s to 40 and stuff like that. I'm in that category now. I'm 41 years old. We were just chatting off air about some
Yeah.
slight just differences of more so recovery than anything. But have you seen a big difference at all from maybe training at 40 to now at 50? Is there a something that pops into your mind of like a longest lever of the differences in that kind of short time frame?
Sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep's the biggest issue. I've got two kids. And my kids are youngish now. I mean, one's actually he's a teenager, so he's 14. I was going to say he just became a teenager, but that's not true. Hence the 2020 comment, right? Like, because when you have kids, everything is measured by your kid's birthday and that sort of
Right.
thing, like how old they are. So you just like, that's the world you live in. And so I think for us, for my wife and I, right, both of us, it's been sleep since the kids have been born. Um, my son was born, I think I was 38, and my daughter was born literally 3 weeks before my 41st birthday, right?
Mhm.
So going from my 40s into my 50s, the sleep has been a huge, huge difference. And that's the thing
Yeah.
that I was just on a coaching call earlier today, and we were talking about sleep for, improving testosterone levels, free T levels, that sort of thing. And that's the one thing that I harp on most with most of my clients because I don't know how your sleep is, but I think it's fair to say that most parents over 40 are sleep deprived in some way, shape, or form, and that impacts definitely your training and your ability to recover,
Yeah.
right, from training.
Yeah. Have you seen, is it more of the challenge of getting quality sleep, or you feel the difference more from a good night's sleep versus a poor night's sleep?
Yes,
Yeah.
the answer is yes, both. You know, uh, my daughter is like a hummingbird, so hummingbirds are like they're super fast twitch and they have a tremendous amount of energy. She does gymnastics, and so right now she just increased her training hours, excuse me, from what was it, 12? No, excuse me, 6 hours a week to I think she's up to like 16 hours a week or somewhere around there. Huge increase. And as a result, it takes her a little while to come down. And so, we'll be falling asleep and then around midnight or 1 or 2, she's still up, right? And then you hear the door open to her bedroom and the click of the light on in the bathroom, and then you know toilet seats slamming and that sort of thing. And so you may have gotten to bed at 10:30, and the lights may have been out by 10:30, but you're awake at 1, 2,
Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Well,
then
it's that natural circadian rhythm switch
yeah,
around that age, right? Where it's just they're naturally more night owls versus early risers.
yeah. And then if you have to get her up in the morning, you're like this, and she's like, "Hi, Daddy, how are you?"
Right. Yeah.
So that's
I've
the biggest thing is the sleep. And then with the sleep comes uh, with sleep interruption and poor sleep comes all kinds of hormonal issues, right? Like it's easier to gain body fat and lose muscle when you don't get a lot of sleep, right? And so then
yeah,
it's easier to make poor food choices when you're sleep deprived, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. I mean, not for me, obviously,
of
but
course.
people
Yeah,
like that.
alpha's right here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I found I dove deep into Matthew Walker's stuff, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, and his book Why We Sleep, which was, I still think as far as just the density of knowledge, one of the best books out there on sleep. You can really sum up a lot of the sleep research though into yeah, get 7 hours plus and just figure out a way to do that. And I've tried a bunch of different things like the hot shower before the evening, the lights off and stuff like that. And I just found that if I do a little bit of deep breathing, like for 10 minutes beforehand, and then darkness, like I got just I think it's like called Alaska Bear sleep mask. That thing has been the game changer
Yeah,
on it. So
yeah,
it you don't need we don't need a million different reasons like why like and dive into all this. Just figure out how to get 7 hours of sleep, and I think you're going to be golden. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, that's what I tell everybody. The diaphragmatic breathing is a huge. That's a game changer. People who are really wound up before bed, set your timer for 10 minutes, right? Don't do the car alarm or the fire alarm on your phone, right? Make sure it's that nice, gentle, relaxing alarm so you're not, you know,
Yeah.
shocked
Eh,
back awake. But
Sleep hack number two. We're getting into a sleep hack podcast. I love it right here. I got one of the sunrise alarms.
yeah,
So it just naturally flows up. Realize if I have the eye mask on, that doesn't help as much. So like get with the birds chirping. But if it is a darkness and you naturally rise up, it is just a more calming way of waking up in the morning. Yeah, not the fire alarm, pop out of bed, nervous system,
yeah,
shoot up from there.
yeah,
Yeah. So, all right. So, first video I wanted to get into was the one on building muscle versus losing fat versus getting strong. What's best for you? I think this is a good question that a lot of people get into of like, what's the thing to start with?
yeah.
With that, is there a hierarchy you think of importance for like let's say somebody who is, see maybe they have been working out before but now just want to elevate, get to the next level. Would you stack those in a specific hierarchy for like the general person?
That's a good question. I always have leaned towards strength, right? So I have to be careful how I say this. Like I have been focused on strength since 1993. How's that? So strength, muscle building, and then fat loss from those two, not as a means to an end. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So when I was coming up, right, like if you wanted to lose fat, you went and did cardio. You did high reps to tone and you went on a low fat diet, right? Cut your calories, cut your fat, lots of cardio, no high reps to tone, right? No heavy lifting. I'm a big believer in training for strength, right? If you train for strength, especially if you lift heavy and explosively, which is why the kettlebell is one of my favorite tools for doing that because I can do both those things. It's really hard to lift explosively with a barbell
Hmm.
because you need to know the Olympic lifts, right? You can get away with medicine balls and sandbags, but those aren't readily accessible for most people, right? So it's easier to keep a couple kettlebells in your basement. Like on this side of my desk, I've got 4 kettlebells, stacked right up there, right? So the reason that's my methodology, my preferred methodology of choice is because you train your fast twitch muscle fibers, which are glucose dependent, right? So they use sugar for fuel. And what problems do most people have our age, right? They're overweight or obese, and most people are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, which means they have blood sugar regulation issues, right? So if
Mhm.
we can take care of the blood sugar regulation issues and the resulting fat accumulation issues from those sugar regulation issues by training those fast twitch muscle fibers. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So
It's Yeah, with that, is there a specific like time or maybe biomarker that you look at with people you work with on strength to then maybe switch over into more like a muscle building or a fat loss kind of specific program? Like, is there specific markers that you look for or somebody should look for to maybe switch over into spotlight a little bit different program?
yeah, good question. I think if you have a lot of visceral fat, like stomach fat, you can get away with focusing on fat loss first, right? So if you were a 300-pound man and most of your fat was right in your stomach, you might want to focus on, a program that targets specifically visceral fat because that is one of the major indicators of longevity and health span, right? Is how much visceral fat you have. If you have a lot, you're going to die sooner and uglier than somebody who doesn't, right? What do you mean by uglier, right? Well, ED, that's always a fun one, right? So the later years of your life's not
Not
going to
good.
be
Yeah.
fun, right? Like your spouse isn't going to be super happy with you. Um, you're going to have peripheral neuropathy, right? In your feet, you may have to have toes or feet, legs amputated because you can't manage or regulate your blood sugar. So I think that's probably my only caveat. But for most people, if you just follow the process, which is get strong, build muscle, and then lose fat in that order, you'll get rid of most of what you're looking to get rid of and gain almost all of what you're looking to gain. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does. Yeah, I know you have a program you put out of like what how strong is strong enough and like
Mhm.
specific protocols. Can you explain that protocol a bit and has that changed or evolved since you first kind of put that out?
Uh, okay, so I'll just reverse it. Has it changed or evolved? No. If anything, I'd probably raise those standards, right? So
Okay.
why? Because as humans, we're designed to expand, right, and grow. And once you hit, one target, there's always like, if you're relatively normal, right, and you have any sort of drive or desire, there's always another target. Like there's always the question, what's next? So those standards are clean and press, 10 sets of five with a pair of 32 kilos in 20 minutes or less, right? So excuse me, 10 sets of five double front squats in 20 minutes or less with that same pair of 32 kilos, and then snatch 100 reps in 10 minutes, usually sets of 10, like 10 sets of 10. So 100 reps total, not 100 reps each hand with a 32-kilo kettlebell. Now, why those? Because if you can hit those standards, I call them the strong enough standards because when you can do that, you're strong enough to withstand pretty much anything that life throws at you. And then, as they say, you can just throw it right back, right?
Mhm.
I've had some people comment and they're like, well, that's not very much, right? Like, it's 135 pounds on a barbell. That's true. But I will tell you, as somebody who cut his teeth on a barbell, the offset handles of the kettlebell make the kettlebell unwieldy, right? And so a pair of 32s, what is that? 64. So is that right? No, 71. So 132 pounds, right? 140 pounds. Help me with my math here. I'm not good at math,
I
but
think it's 71, yeah, 132,
64 kilos.
133 or so. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
132. There you go.
yeah.
Yeah, 132, 133, something like that. So
Yeah.
it's a
But
plate
but
combo.
racking 132 pounds is way different than a
Well,
barbell.
yeah, I so my background is in wrestling, power building, powerlifting, and then ultimately Olympic weightlifting, right? Which is what the modern kettlebell training system is based on, right? Whether it's hard style or gear voice sport, it's the snatch and the clean and jerk, right? The two permutations. That's what we can train and compete in Olympic lifting. And I will tell you that a pair of 32s is way more challenging than a barbell with 135, right? So a barbell with 135 or 60 kilos, that's part of a warm up, right? And depending on what I'm doing, a pair of 32s is part of the training session. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That's the difference.
Yeah. Well, the relative strength. I think was it Donnie Thompson who, who I forget what his squat, record is or so, like 1,000 pounds or something like that, but said that a couple of bulldogs, so two 40 kilogram, bells for a set of eight is like the best like
Yeah.
exercise that he found. This is a guy who, 160 pounds is nothing to this guy for a squat,
Yeah.
and that's what he's saying there. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right. So those are the strong enough standards, right? And I've had lots of people go, "Oh, I could never do that," and then my response is, "Well, you never will," right? So like my outlook is, what can I do, right? And then can I do more?
mm,
And I think when you're over 40 and you have kids, I don't know if you've experienced this. You don't have kids, do you?
no, not yet. No.
Not yet. All right. Well,
We'll
let
see
me
what
know
the
if you
future holds.
experience this. What's
That's
that?
we'll see what the future holds. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, but it's weird. Like it's almost it's hard to put into words, but you have to be careful because it's easy to just coast and lose ground because you're so focused on providing for your family and providing for the kids and making sure the kids have what they need, right? So like their goals almost become your goals in a certain um, way of speaking. Do you know what I'm saying? And then your health and your strength take a backseat to everything they're doing,
Hmm.
right? And so I think it's super important, especially for guys over 40, because when you're 40, you've already been in the workforce about 20 years. And so
Yeah.
you've already accumulated a lot of the negative impact of driving a desk and dealing with, horrible bosses. My boss is terrible. Like I can't stand that guy,
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah. It's just
you know, the life of an entrepreneur. So it becomes super important to find standards and then achieve those standards and then just keep pushing the bar, right? Because again, we're designed to expand and grow all the days of our lives, right? And
mhm.
we're not supposed to just settle. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does. Is that weight dependent at all for an individual, like a 140 pound person versus a, 200 pound person?
No, great question. And I've had a lot of comments about the standards, right? Saying, well, it's really easy for a big guy to hit those numbers and not the little guys. But the fact of the matter is it's not. It's actually the opposite, right? In the sport of Olympic weightlifting, there was a guy named Naim Suleimanoglu, Pocket Hercules, and he's since passed. But he had a 3.14 clean and jerk for his body weight, 3.14 or 3.16 times his body weight clean and jerk.
Phew.
So he weighed 60, 62, 64 kilos in that range. I can't remember the exact amount. And he clean and jerked over 180, right? Or like 185, 185 kilos, so 400 plus pounds,
Wow.
right? And if you go and look at the heavyweights, those guys aren't even clean and jerking like 2.5 times their body weight, right?
Right.
So it's hard for them to get, for many of them, to get to 2x body weight. So for example, the current, I believe he's the Olympic champ and world champ, a guy named Lasha. I can't pronounce his last name. He's from Georgia. He weighs about 180 kilos, and his clean and jerk is 265 kilos, right? 266 kilos. See
Wow.
the difference, right? Like his clean and jerk is only, again, math on camera, 80, 85 kilo difference versus 3 times your body weight, right? 60 kilos, 180 kilos, 180 kilos, 260 kilos.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier for smaller guys to lift bigger numbers. And part of that is because they recover faster, right? The bigger you are, the more energy your body requires, right? And the longer it takes for you to recover.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes sense?
I'm speaking for the lighter guys, me
Yeah.
being the 150 pounds at the moment right there. So heavyweights can get challenging in some ways, to push on that.
And that's why you don't see rock climbers who are 300 pounds, right?
Yeah.
You see them once and then you don't see them at all, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
they're at the
Yeah.
bottom of the cliff,
Yeah.
right?
Is there a relative standard for women at all that you've worked with, specific weight wise on like a strong enough protocol?
I would just cut those numbers in half, pretty
Okay.
much. Yeah, maybe you can bump them up, say 2 by 20, right, for the really strong women.
Hmm.
So I generally don't work a lot with women anymore. I do have some
Right.
female clients. In fact, one of my clients, she and I have been working together since 2001. right? We took a little hiatus, but so she's 54, 55,
Mhm.
and her her strong bell size is the 24. Like she feels really strong and accomplished when that 24 goes over her head.
Love it. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. So
So
kind of connecting this build muscle, lose fat, get strong type work, strength kind of being that hierarchy there. Is it like a good thing? Get to those numbers first. That's a good goal to work with, and don't worry about the other ones. They're going to take care of themselves probably along the way if you just stick to that plan.
I think that's a fair assessment, right? Now, whether or not you can do that is a different story because, every day we're bombarded with like the latest, greatest,
Yeah.
scientific research discovery and, whatever. I mean, we're talking about YouTube channels here. I mean, I don't know about the thumbnails you get, but I mean, I get a lot of clickbaity thumbnails.
Oh yeah.
So,
It's a lot
so
of
whether or
yeah.
not, yeah, you can stay focused or you're a cat with a laser pointer, right?
Yeah.
That's a big problem for guys our age because we look back at our 20 something year old self, right? I always say that, we as guys, we as men we're stuck in our minds somewhere between 17 and 23, right? It's like the back in the day mentality or mindset when you were at your peak in your prime. And that's how you see yourself,
Mhm.
right? And you always measure yourself against that standard for most of us. And most of us who had like athletic or active backgrounds, right? That's how we measure ourselves.
Yeah.
And so things when you're young, everything comes really fast and easy, right? Because you're young. And fast forward 20, 30 years, things don't come fast and easy because you're older, right? And you have 20 to 30 years of baggage, right? Emotional, stress fueled baggage that's ravaged your body from, you know, work. Is what you get paid. I used to work in the city, New York City, and remember these guys? They were traders, right? So there's trade stocks at the exchanges, and they were getting paid 40 hours a week, right? But they'd be in at 5 a.m. and they wouldn't leave till 10 p.m. And they
Yeah.
would do that 5 days a week. So the reason I bring that up is because most jobs these days are you get paid for 40 hours, you get benefits and a retirement package. But if you don't work as much as you're expected, then they're happy to get rid of you and they'll find somebody else who will usually work for the same, right, pay grade, pay structure, but less benefits and more hours. You know what I'm saying? So you've got that pressure of, hey, I'm getting paid 40 hours. I got these bennies. I can't afford to lose them. And yet I got a 60 hour, 70 hour, 80-hour work expectation, right? Slash demand placed upon me. And that takes its toll. Plus you got marriage and kids and all that other stuff, or depending on
Yeah.
how many marriages you've been through. So
Yeah, and that's a rough demographic in there on that front. So
oh
it's yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's it. It's that allure of the salary, but once the salary's there, they don't start tracking hours anymore. You
yeah,
just you work till the job's done. Absolutely.
golden
Now we've
handcuffs.
we've got you in here. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's right. And so all that adds up to a guy who's 40 and he wakes up and he looks in the mirror and it clicks. He's like, man, I see myself as I identify, have to be careful how I use these words these days. I identify as, in my mind's eye, as a 21-year-old, right? Like the way I was back in the day. But the person, the man looking back in the mirror is not that dude,
yeah.
right? And because that dude made progress is, like lightning fast, I still think that I should make progress lightning fast,
Mhm.
right? And so every time a new workout of the day comes out, I'm the laser pointer. And I never make progress because I'm always jumping around. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
It does, yeah. It's
Because
funny because I'm in that category. I've been training for almost 20 years now, kind of in kettlebell specifically since 2010, so about 15 or so that we're getting into. I can stay on a pretty good track of it and not jump ship. But the difference that does get challenging is some days just strength feels like you can grip the world and just fly up. And then other days like you feel like that is like 20 pounds heavier on both sides
correct.
like easily from there, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it. You could do everything the exact same. That's one of the more challenging things that I've seen as just my training age has got a lot more miles on the tires right there. There
Yeah,
could be no rhyme or reason for it. Just some days it's like that is just grinding versus the other
yeah,
days it's just flying up.
yeah, exactly. exactly right. And when you're young, when you're in your, I mean, I never had a bad workout when I was 17 or 18, right? Like every time I went to the gym, more weight on the bar, more reps on the cable column or whatever it was, right? More pull-ups, more, every day was more, more, more. And that lasted until I was about 23, right? And I had to go to work,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, and that was the big thing. So I was one of the things that made me successful is that I was trained, I was mentored by my weightlifting coach who was Cuban. He came over on the in 1980 when Castro released the political prisoners and they hit Miami. He was a political prisoner. But before he was a political prisoner, he was on the Cuban sports system, and he was actually on the Cuban weightlifting team. And he described his life to me like this. He said, I would get up, I do, go to the gym, I train 3, 4 hours, and then I'd go spend the rest of the day doing whatever I want. He said, once a month, I went down to the manufacturing facility and picked up my paycheck. Right. And he said, and once a month, I got a penicillin shot. And he'd say, how did he phrase it? He goes, but I'm not sick. And they say, well, see, it's working. So it wasn't a penicillin shot, it was steroids. Right. So that was his life. Right. And then he didn't sign the Communist Manifesto or whatever it was that he was, supposed to sign. And eventually he became a political prisoner, spent some time in jail, and then got tossed out. And so he told me very early on, he said, hey, and he was trained, so he was on the Cuban team, and he was trained by a guy named Alexei Medvedev, who was a world champion weightlifter and later went on to become the Soviet team coach. So he was trained for a period of time by Medvedev. And he said, I remember this because I was making the transition from a 6 day a week program, which was I was crushing it on, and then I'm going to work, getting up at 5 in the morning and heading into New York City to train people, and not getting home till 10 o'clock at night. And I'm wondering why I can't train 6 days a week like I used to could, which was just, a month or two ago. And I said, but the Soviets and all the books and all that. And he said, you can't train that way. He said that was for those people under those circumstances, right? Like those are athletes. You can't train regular people that way because regular people have jobs. You can't train that way, right? They have marriages, they have mortgage payments, they have second mortgages, they have car payments, they have kids, they have all these external stressors. And of course, I was completely dismissive of them. I'm like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's when I started collecting injuries, right? So,
Ah, yes. It's,
yeah,
it's called, yeah, the forced break. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The forced break, right?
Yeah.
So,
It's an interesting thing because I've had this I remember when Alex Salkin was on the podcast, and he gave me this great line of optimal versus practical. And we live in such an everything is optimized right now. It's like it's its own religion of what is
that's
the
right.
best way to do everything. And the problem with that is you're always chasing the best way because the best way is always the one that you're not doing because
That's exactly
the
right.
nuance has just gone away versus what's most practical. And I've always said it's like your program should fit around your life, not your life fit around your program. Yeah, if you are on a Cuban communist national team when this is the only thing you need to do, yeah, then maybe things are a little bit different. But if you've got family, if you've got obligations, or even, just you've got other things that are interest of
Right.
you of life,
Yeah.
then you should figure out, you know, what's the right volume for you to get into. And as you said there, what works right now might not necessarily be what works 3 weeks down the road or 3 months down the road. So there's no such thing as optimal if you actually do the right practical thing that is optimal by
Right.
default.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't even, I love that differentiation. And I was just going to say, I don't even think at this point in life I'm looking for optimal, right? So it's just what can I do today? Like I got those, I've got my goals out here on the horizon, and it's like how much can I chip off today and show up tomorrow and do the same thing, or show up in the next training session and do the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Very similar to what's practical.
Yeah.
So,
So I want to ask you a bit about volume. I think this is a really interesting topic of how much volume of getting, because there's
mm,
the standard kind of traditional way of like X amount of sets for this many reps. But what I've heard a lot of what you've talked about is time duration, and then use that as like how much as like the governor to get like the amount of volume in. When did you start using more of a protocol like that, and why is that maybe more beneficial to then like a specific set versus rep protocol?
Yeah, those are great questions. I started using that probably about 2010, 2011, where I was training clients in person still, right? And I noticed that the standard 3 sets of 10 or whatever, some clients could get through it, some clients couldn't. Now let me just say, did everybody do 3 sets of 10? No, I'm using that as an example, right?
Right.
But you know, the traditional strength training programs, right? 80% 5 sets of 3, right? 85% 5 sets of 2. Those types of sets and reps. Not everybody could get through them. And some days were great days. And I noticed this from my own training too. Some days were great days. And then, like you alluded to earlier, like other days, 20 pounds heavier, even though the bar bell weight was the same. Or as I say, you know, some days you're the foot and the other days you're the cigarette butt, right? You know what I mean?
It's a
You
good
know,
analogy for it, yeah.
right? So um, I just started messing around with duration. Like, hey, what can you get done in this time frame? Because typically I'd have clients who train an hour, and this is what it would look like. The first 5 minutes, it was like blah 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 blah. How are you doing? Blah 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 blah. And then 10 to 15 minutes after that, it was a slow, gradual warm up because there's still some blah 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 blah. And the reason that is because they're decompressing from their stress filled work.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
It's not that they're lazy. That's their
Just
decompression.
that energy shift. Yeah.
Yeah, and a transition time into like their time. And so you're 20 minutes in and you're on a 60-minute clock. So you've got, you know, 20 to 30 minutes to get some good solid work done. And then the back end of that is cool down. So you're taking, you know, 10 to 20 minutes to cool down. And so that's where that pretty much came from. And I just started tracking metrics that way, right? So that's my earliest recognition of how that worked. And it was just, what can you do today?
Mhm.
Right. And then I just started messing around with corresponding repetition maxes, right, which is one set to failure with a certain weight, you know, without a technical degradation. In other words, your technique
Okay.
doesn't break, right? And then I started correlating that to specific prescribed rep ranges, right? So my two favorite RMs are a 10 RM and a 5 RM. So I train 5 RM for pure strength. And then I don't say do 5 reps with your 5 RM. Like you find your 5 RM and then you know, you build from there, use specific rep ranges off there. Same thing with the 10 RM. And the 10 RM I like for building strength and hypertrophy and getting back to, you know, the earlier question about the hierarchy, that 10 RM is a really good range for burning off body fat as well.
Mm.
So there's that. And then I just found that it tended to fit people's attention span. And the more I experimented with it, the more I found it was easier for people to recover by just moving at their own pace. And I would use things like, and now it's called the talk test, right? Or we know it
Right.
as a talk test. I would use that occasionally, but more often than not, I would use the speed of movement, right? So if you're doing swings, is every swing have the same power output? Are you hitting the same height, the same apex? Or is the apex starting to drop and your hips aren't as snappy? Well, then let's just call that set done and we'll rest and we'll move
Mhm.
on. So I found that the 20, 30 minutes was a really good way for people to get high quality work in and be able to recover from it so they could go back the next day, right? And whether they were the heel, the foot, or the cigarette butt, they could still make progress.
Right, yeah.
Make sense?
And I think the awareness of whether you're, the heel or the cigarette butt, that's a skill that you need to learn just as well. And I found this when I was doing a lot of the iron cardio work with Brett, with kind of work constraint or time constraint based work, like how many rounds can you get in a
Yep.
20 or 30-minute span. I found like my intuition of recovery started to build up a lot
Right.
more. So you kind of, a good woo-woo term, you get more kind of one with your workout rather than like, all right, I'm going to do a set and then I'm going to play around and fuck around on my phone for a little bit. And then, all right, now, yeah, I think I'm rest. I'll go do another one. It's like, no, you actually like kind of have a good metric of, all right, I did 30 sets last time, from on both sides, so 15 total. All right, now I'm getting 60. Okay, now I'm seeing some progress
Right.
without being so kind of just focus on, does this feel right? Does this not feel right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of guys ask me like, how much is enough, right? In the old days, I would say, and I think these are still generally good guidelines, but 10 to 20 reps total workload for strength, right? About 30 to 50, maybe 60 reps for muscle building, and then up to 100 reps, maybe the extremes of up to 200 reps if you're talking about some kettlebell ballistics for conditioning and
Mm,
endurance. Um, but a lot of guys will ask me, well, I did 150 reps, in the giant in 30 minutes. Is that good? And I go, daggum, man. I think that's my rep count for the entire week using the giant.
right, right.
So it's just dependent on the individual, right? Everybody's geared a little differently too, right? So
What's happening there? Is that just way too light a weights? You just need to increase the weights up at that point?
it could be possibly. Yeah, they just instead of using the prescribed guidelines, like whatever RM it
Right.
is, 10 RM or 5 RM, depending on the program, they just grab whatever they have, right? So there's that, or they have really sloppy technique, right? Or they're geared for endurance, like they're mainly slow twitch guys, right? And so they can just grind, grind, grind. Um, as opposed to me, I'm fast twitch, and so like I'm not kidding when I say 150 reps in a week on the giant that's a lot of work for me,
Hmm.
right? Like per week. I fatigue really quickly and my rep counts per set, my RMs are terrible.
Yeah.
So well, what's an example of that? So typically this is a metric we used to use is what's your 80%, and then you do an RM off your 80%, right? So 80% of
Okay.
80% of a one repetition max. This is something Alfonso taught me. And if you were like 6 or lower, right, then you're more fast twitch. If you're 10 or higher, you're more slow twitch. If you're in that 7, 8, 9 range, like you have a good balance and blend between slow twitch and fast twitch.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always on the 85%, 4 reps, 3 reps. Like
That's I'm the same way. Yeah.
yeah, I can do, and I'm weird like that because I can do a lot of sets with low reps.
Mhm.
I can do twos all day long, ones and twos all day, love them. But threes, fours, fives, like you've heard Brett say fives is cardio. Like
Yep.
that's not a joke, right? For some of us, that's not a joke.
Yeah. That's fine. Do you see it? Is that more common, you think, versus like the other side, or have you seen it's pretty much a balance, like it's just a coin flip of whether you are more kind of fast twitch versus kind of slow twitch?
Well, I think it's your God-given genetics, but it's also like the way you train yourself too.
Mhm.
Right? So I mean, I was kind of weird. I ran cross country and wrestled in high school. And so you got pure aerobic work and then like some glycolytic work. But
Yeah.
even if I look back at wrestling in high school and college, like I was that lazy guy who would take a shot and then lie on you. You know what I mean? And then catch his breath while I would sit there and I put on my weight.
Shaking out the arms and letting the belly do
Yeah,
the work.
trying to
Yeah.
catch my breath while, make it look like I'm not stalling. So I'm trying to set up my next move, right? So even back then, and then when I would race cross country, it was always like, okay, let me see if I can get to the next guy, sprint, catch my breath, sprint. So, I think it's wiring
Yeah.
and then also how you train because you can convert those fast twitch into slow twitch and those super fast twitch, the 2X into 2As. Like, you can convert them.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I've always had like personally like ballistic work has always come so much easier to me. Like I can do a 200, NL day on snatching and feel totally fine on there. And I can do that all day and I'll feel great. But a grindy based workout like that is going to zap my nervous system so much differently. And obviously it's two different blends of stuff and you start to conform to it more. But like yeah, like the ballistic, more of like a power based type work just naturally feels better. And I was pondering this a lot when last time I had Craig Marker on the podcast and we were chatting about this research. And We talk about loss of muscle mass as we age, but he said the main thing we don't talk about is the loss of fast twitch fibers. We're losing power at a much higher rate than
100%.
strength. So keeping that fast twitch work is so much more, it's something you just got to be aware of specifically as you're going into that, that next season of life. So after he said that, like I'm like, oh, I'm keeping ballistics in at some point, no matter what I'm
Yeah.
doing in regards
Yeah.
to programming.
Yeah. 100%. That's always on my radar, right? Like I was always a fast twitch power guy, like heavy and explosive. That's always, I mean, since I've been weight training, that those have been the two. And so when I found out however long ago it was that we lose about 10% of our fast twitch muscle fibers per decade,
Mhm.
right, over the age of 30, I thought, man, I'm keeping that stuff in there, right? I'm not.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason for the prescription. You asked me at the beginning of the call the prescription because, right, if you lose your fast twitch muscle fibers, then you lose your metabolic machinery essentially,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So then you're just this is why guys who are 70 who don't strength train. I remember both my grandfathers, man, even at 60, they look like Christmas trees. You know what I'm talking about? So
That
they're
that
shaped like
pear
Christmas
shape,
trees.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it
And they
all
got
goes
all the,
right
they
to the
got all the
belly.
body fat, like the rolls. I mean, my one grandfather, we'd go to the lake and he'd sit in the chair and he'd get up and he got sunburned, but he'd have the fat roll stripe. So it'd be like red, white, red, white. You know what I mean? Like skinny, pointy shoulders and then a Christmas tree. But they weigh the same as they did when they were in the high school, right? Like
Right.
I weigh the same as I did, but your body composition is totally different. Why? Because you lost your fast twitch muscle fibers. As a result, your basic metabolic rate, basal metabolic rate has slowed, which means you are not burning as many calories either at rest or at work as you once did, right? So if fat loss is part of my is one of my goals and it's out there on the horizon, someday I want to get to X% body fat and lose X amount of inches, then I need to go back and make sure that I'm building and training those fast twitch muscle fibers.
Right. No, I love it. So, asking about power work specifically with ballistics, a lot of work I've seen that you do is on snatching over swing. And I'm not putting words in your mouth of saying it's superior. I'll do that myself on that. I
It is
found,
superior.
yeah, I found more that the more I've studied, the more I've worked with people, getting them to snatch has yielded a lot better results and is much better in a ballistic than the swing from there. Have you done a lot of like work in comparison of these two? Because the swing is still kind of the center of the kettlebell universe in a lot of different ways, but I'm like, I don't know. I think like snatching, there's just another level up there for people.
Yeah, I mean, I've been banging that drum for 15 years, probably since. So I
Really?
got
Okay.
online in 2009, right, with the Kettlebell Secrets podcast, back in the RKC days, and yeah, I mean, right from there. I mean, the joke back then was like, the answer to your question is more swings and get ups. And I was always like, very funny, but not really. Like the snatch is a superior exercise because it involves the upper body, right? It travels twice the distance. And then you have like, my physics is not the greatest, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but the acceleration is twice as much
Yeah.
because you're coming from above your head to horizontal to the floor to right underneath the body, where the swing only goes horizontal to the floor, at least the what we now know is the Russian swing versus the American swing. So you're not training the arm nearly as much. You're certainly not training the shoulder girdle and shoulder musculature anywhere near as much, right? And so your power output, I mean, it just makes good sense that it takes a lot more power to get a kettlebell over your head than just waist height, right? So I've
Mm.
always been a big advocate of the snatch, um, to the point of probably being obnoxious about it.
I love it. I love the obnoxious piece of it. I just found too that it's a swing is an easy thing to learn on the basic, but it's also a really easy thing to overload too quickly with poor technique.
Sure.
Because you can kind of get away with swinging a heavier bell, but it's not really, you're using your back a lot more. You cannot feel like where the compensations is going on versus a snatch. There is a built-in governor on there of you need to be able to, if you maintain good technique with a snatch, I think there's a lot more proficiency and benefit and also safety to doing a snatch over a swing.
Yeah. Yeah. You can certainly lean back on the top of a swing. I've never seen anybody lean back on the top of a snatch. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, literally, I've never seen anybody do that because the bell literally will not let you lean back. Right.
Yeah.
Because the bell is forcing your arm to be straight and you have to hold that weight with your structure.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah. Have you played around with the half snatch much at all?
let me first go on record by saying I don't understand the term half snatch. And
Okay.
actually hate that term because of the Olympic lifting background, right? And I understand that it's Olympic lifting is not gear boy sport. And yes, I was talking to a guy that I came up with in the RKC, and he went into the gear boy world, and they do use the half snatch in there. But to me, the snatch is one movement, right?
Hmm.
It's on the floor, and you lift it over your head.
Gotcha.
That's the snatch, right? Well, there's no such thing as a half snatch, right? Because you either snatch it or you don't. Does that make sense?
Have you
Right.
played with the one where you snatch it overhead and
And
then
then you
bring it to
lower
the
it into
rack
the rack.
position and
Yes,
then drop
yes,
from the rack? Yes.
yes. That is how I've been prescribing double kettlebell snatches since 2009. I do not prescribe single kettlebell snatches like that, although I do understand that now the direction that a lot of the certifications are moving is they are now building in the so-called half snatch as part of the teaching. And the reason I don't like that is that's what the clean is for,
Hmm.
right? So in my methodology, you build the hip hinge with the swing and the goblet squat. The two feed each other. You train shoulder musculature and some core strength and stability and the overhead lockout position with the Turkish get up, right? You learn how to direct the bell with the clean, right? You train the shoulder and arm musculature with the press. And then you're able to load the snatch on top of that, right? Because you now have all the points underneath the snatch.
Mhm.
So if you ever do a high speed clean and press, it looks almost like a snatch.
Right.
So that's the way I teach everything. Is it right? I don't know, but it sure works.
Sure. No, I can play with it. The one thing I've liked about working with it is it's what I've seen with people is allowed to go to one belt up and get that power drive without not letting that overspeed eccentric from the top force their momentum down and then get into bad technique from there. So not saying it's right, but it's just a good thing to I've been playing around with over the last year that's been just very fun to toy with.
Yeah, I could make the argument that that's what a push press is for.
Yes. I love it. That's one of the things you talked about is that there's the clean and press, which I absolutely love. We've talked about a lot, but then the clean and push press from there. Push press is not talked about a lot from like a strength piece. Do you use that a lot with people? When would you use that? Would you say?
Yeah, great question. Depends on the individual. So I've used it extensively in my own training. Um, the argument against the push press is that this is an argument that I've heard. I haven't heard it recently, but about 10, 15 years ago, the argument was it was a grindy ballistic, right? And it was kind of trapped somewhere between the press and the jerk, right? But in my world, coming up through the strength ranks, if you couldn't press a weight, nobody was looking, you cheated it up with your knees, right?
Right.
Little knee bend, boom, push press. And then in Olympic lifting, we use push press as an assistance exercise to the jerk. And then, right, if you couldn't push press it, you would jerk it. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? So it's can't press it, push press it, can't push press it, jerk it. And the load becomes significantly greater on each of those, right? So all you have to do is look at the loads that Olympic lifters are pressing. If you can catch that in a training hall versus what they're jerking, and it's twice as much, right?
Mhm.
And the push press, depending on the individual, falls somewhere in between those two, right? It can be 30%, 20 to 30% more than the press. It can be 50 to 70% more than a press, depending on how strong the legs are. And the point in doing it is you get to overload the upper body musculature in a way you can't do with just the press, right? And in a way you can't do with the jerk, because the jerk, you basically you're skipping, you are guiding with the upper body, but you're dropping underneath the weight and catching it with your shoulder,
Right.
right? With a push press, you're not. There's a knee dip, and then you're driving straight up, and you got to lock out your structure and keep it rigid, right? And then drive hard with your arms. So it's a way to overload the upper body pretty significantly. And the argument against doing it is some people say that it doesn't affect the press, right? Like it doesn't make your press go up. It's always made my press go up, right? The argument is Turkish. So the argument that a popular argument, I don't know if it is still popular anymore, is Turkish get up to build your press, right? Turkish and push press doesn't build your press, but I've found it to be the opposite. Turkish get up does nothing for my press. Push
Yeah.
press builds my press. What's the right answer? The answer is test it for yourself and see, right?
Yeah, I've had this debate too about heavy Turkish get-ups and really the usage behind it. And I found that it's it's a lot less beneficial once you get to it, kind of like you're strong enough. I think like once you get to like a decent weight on there, using it for more of a total body assessment and kind of getting everything together, I think it's a great tool. As far as really maximizing like a press strength, I have not seen that benefit. And I've
Yeah.
done a lot of heavy, Turkish get-ups from working on Sinister for a while
Yeah.
and getting in. But I think that push press, it almost gets that like middle child syndrome of gets like lost in the shuffle because
I love that. That's a great explanation.
yeah, well, because like the strict press is great, everybody loves that, and then the jerk is a phenomenal tool. But the jerk, there's a technical component that some people don't get it right away. Just the circuitry doesn't get in there. And I found with working with people of adding the push press in, it gets a power component in there too. With
Absolutely.
a lot of people who are desk jockeys, they're working a lot. On any given day, they could get a little tighter in the shoulders, still allowing to get that volume up there overhead without that grindy feeling. And then once in a while, you get those tweaks in there. I think it's a beautiful exercise.
I do too. And I just wrote about this the other day in my newsletter. The jerk is really, I don't recommend that for most of us guys over 40 unless you A, have good shoulder mobility and good thoracic spine extension and good hip mobility and no lower back issues.
Mhm.
Then the jerk is good for you. Or B, you're willing to address, you understand that you have any one or more of those weak spots and you're willing to address them, right? Because it does take an inordinate amount of mobility that most desk jockeys don't have, right? In order to get, you can get away with one bell because you can twist and turn, but to put a pair of bells over your head in a jerk, that's
Yeah,
something you got to work towards, right? So I just prescribed the push press. It's like 90% of the benefit, almost, I would say, right? So, am I gonna not take the test, or am I gonna shoot, right? Because I can't get 100 on it, or am I gonna take the test and still get an A with a 90,
mhm.
right? So I'm gonna go with option B every single time. So I think that's one of the huge values also of the push press, like you brought up, is it's that middle ground. It allows people to get most of the benefits of the jerk, right?
Yeah,
Without having to work so hard to get the benefits of the jerk, if you know what I'm saying.
I love it. Yeah. Geoff Neupert, you're awesome. This has been a blast as always from here.
Is
So
it that, is
what's
it that time already?
I know it's that time already. What's next for you? What are you working on? Anything coming up for you?
I'm working on going on vacation here, so that's the only thing on my mind. I'm
There
gonna
you
be
go.
heading down to the beach next week. Next week, yeah, yeah, next Friday. As we shoot this, we're shooting this on a Thursday, so on a Friday, I'm going down to the beach with my wife and kids, and just gonna relax. And that's the only thing on my mind at this point.
I love it. I love it.
And
So
then when we get back, we'll just reassess and just keep helping guys out, right? Helping guys get over the training as a 20-something-year-old when you're 40 and 50 and 60 and so on and so forth.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So, brother, always love chatting with you. I always learn so much from you with these conversations and the work that you're doing. As I said, it's I think in a stage of where most people are in 40, 50 of just adults in general, we need more refinement rather than expansion. I think you do a
Yeah.
beautiful job in all the channels that you do, specifically your YouTube channel of cutting through the bullshit in here and just focusing on really what are the principles behind getting stronger and just, doing this in the best way possible. So I really appreciate all the work, brother.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate your kind words. I appreciate the podcast and all the perspectives you're bringing on this show, man. It's great. Keep up the good
I,
work.
I appreciate it. If you want to check out everything that you're doing, what's the best place that they can go?
Probably just go over to my YouTube channel, right? It's youtube.com/Geoff Neupert. So
Perfect.
GeoffNeupert.
Awesome. All right. Well, till next time, we'll do number
All right.
4. So,
All right. We'll talk
listeners,
soon.
thank you so much. Check the show notes. You can check all of Jeff's work, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right. Peace.